Hello, everybody. We're very pleased to be able to share this video with you with information about UN Women. My name is Shahra Razavi. I'm the chief of the Research and Data section at UN Women, based in New York. And this video will give you, hopefully, interesting overview of what UN Women is doing, and then I will be zooming in and focusing a bit more in terms of the work that our section, Research and Data, does, the kind of research we produce, the knowledge products that we share, and how this fits into the broader aims and mandate of our organization. So with that, let me now share the PowerPoint slides with you, which provide the information that I hope will be of use to you as you think about your career opportunities within the UN system and with UN Women in particular. So let us start with a very broad kind of overview about our organization, UN Women. UN Women is the entity within the UN system that is dedicated to achieving gender equality and women's empowerment worldwide. UN Women was established in July 2010 to be the global advocate for women's rights and to accelerate progress on achieving gender equality. So here, this is a nice picture to depict UN Women's identity for you, with hope for women's rights and women's empowerment. I would like now to tell you a little bit about what the priority areas of UN Women are in terms of the work that we do. Very importantly, UN Women aims and works very hard to strengthen the global norms and standards on gender equality and empowerment of women and girls. This includes international conventions such as the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, as well as all the intergovernmental agreements that exist to bring gender equality into these agreements and to ensure that they are actually used in the kind of work that member states and others do as part of development. Now, in terms of our thematic focus, political participation is an important area of UN Women's work, and the aim is really to make sure that women can lead, participate in, and benefit equally from governance systems at all levels, from the global down to the local. The second area of great importance to UN Women's work is women's economic empowerment, and the aim here is to ensure that women have income security, access to decent work, and economic autonomy. The third area of immense importance for women's work, UN Women's work, is on ending violence against women, to ensure that all women and girls live a life that is free from all forms of violence. And finally, a very important area of UN Women's work in recent decades has been the agenda of peace and security and humanitarian action, to ensure that women and girls contribute to building peace and resilience in all societies and that they benefit equally from humanitarian actions. I also want to emphasize that in terms of our normative work, we support the formulation of globally agreed standards for gender equality, for example, through the agreed conclusions of the Commission on Status of Women, as well as other intergovernmental agreements, and we help UN member states to implement these standards. So that's really important. For example, implementation of CEDAW, as I mentioned. We also coordinate and assist other parts of the UN system in their efforts to advance gender equality. So this is our coordination mandate. And we have a program, global programs, regional, national programs, a series of flagship programs that are meant to assist in the implementation of the areas of work that UN Women specializes in. Also, we have global UN Women campaigns, for example, the He for She campaign, as well as Unite, which is to end violence against women. We work with a range of partners, including governments, donors, academics, researchers, the UN system, civil society, and the private sector. So now in this map, you can see where UN Women works. Now, in addition to our headquarters, which is based in New York, we have 3 liaison offices. We have 6 regional offices. These are based in Panama City, in Dakar, in Nairobi, in Cairo, in Istanbul, and in Bangkok. And we also have 47 country offices. Now, UN as a whole has, over the many, many years and decades that it has been active, contributed significantly to ideas that really are of use in terms of addressing global challenges, and that the intellectual history project of the UN, which was a research project that was led by eminent thinkers such as Louis Emery, Richard Jolly, and Thomas Weiss, came to the conclusion that the UN has, over its whole life, demonstrated capacity to make major and important intellectual contributions. And in many ways, as they said, UN has been ahead of the curve. Now, ideas of gender equality have been part of that intellectual history of the UN. It's important to remember that. And in UN Women's strategic plan, the latest strategic plan that was approved and is now during the first year it's of operation in 2018, UN Women's strategic plan emphasizes the important knowledge hub function of UN Women. As the strategic plan explains, UN Women accounts for about 1/3 of the total UN personnel that work towards the achievement of SDG 5, which is on gender equality and women's empowerment. Now, in complement to its own specialist knowledge, UN Women can access a vast network of knowledge and expertise, and it acts very often as a knowledge hub to support gender analysis and gender mainstreaming. In this way, UN Women promotes system-wide coherence on gender equality and women's empowerment and interagency synergies so that the initiatives for women and girls are complementary and mutually reinforcing. Now, becoming a little bit more specific here, I want to say a few words about UN Women's research and data work. Research and data analysis is a very core and important part of the work that UN Women's Policy Division does. This is both in New York as well as by policy advisors that sit in our regional and country offices under the 5 thematic areas that were already highlighted in previous slides. The work is complemented by a small team at headquarters here in what is called the Research and Data section within Policy Division. But more specifically, the Research and Data section's role is to produce UN Women's three flagship reports, about which I will have a little bit to say later on, as well as to produce 2 series of publications that we have, about which I will say a little bit more, and also to lead on the work on gender statistics. So let me, with that, shift to saying a little bit more about those specific areas. On our flagship reports, of which we have 3, the first one I want to say a little bit about is Progress of the World's Women, the first issue of which came out in the year 2000, when UN Women was not already established, but UNIFEM, which is one of the organizations that was then merged into UN Women, produced the first issue of Progress of the World's Women in the year 2000. And now Progress is produced once every 3 years, and it is on a topic which is of contemporary global relevance. The last report, which came out in 2015, was titled Transforming Economies, Realizing Rights. You will see the picture on the cover of that report in the middle of the slide. This report brought together new conceptual work on women's human rights and the economic domain, together with data analysis, case studies, in order to provide lessons for policymakers on how both economic policies and social policies can work together in tandem to enable the realization of women's rights and to create more dynamic economies and more inclusive societies. The next issue of Progress of the World's Women will be in the area of families in a changing world, and we will have more to say about that when the report is launched. A new flagship report is our SDG Global Monitoring Report, which was just launched on the 14th of February. The title is Turning Promises into Action. This is the first report of its kind coming out of the UN system that looks at the SDG agenda, the Agenda 2030, through a gender lens and provides a gender analysis of all 17 Sustainable Development Goals from a gender perspective. So the focus is not only on Goal 5, which is the dedicated goal to gender equality and women's rights, but to the other 16 goals as well. So we look at all 17 goals from a gender equality perspective, produce data and statistics on those goals, show where the indicators framework is at, and also look at policies that can enable the realization of those goals. The third flagship report that our research and data section is responsible for is a report that is mandated by the General Assembly, and it's called World Survey on the Role of Women in Development. This report is produced once every 5 years. The last report, which is the one that you see on the right, was on gender equality and sustainable development, which was published in 2014. And in 2019, we will be launching the 2019 World Survey, which is going to be on the theme of the care economy and gender equality. Now, in addition to these three, what we call flagship reports, the research and data section is also responsible for UN Women's work on gender statistics. We now have a new flagship program initiative called Making Every Woman and Girl Count, which is dedicated to improving the production and use of gender statistics. How do we do this? We focus and address three interrelated challenges. First, to address the weak policy space and legal and financial environment to produce gender statistics at national level by promoting a supportive and well-coordinated policy environment that ensures that gender-responsive localization and effective monitoring of the SDGs takes place. We also assist with data production and support efforts to improve the regular production of gender statistics by the national statistical systems and to make sure that the SDGs and other national commitments are met. We also ensure that data that is produced is accessible. Now, lack of access to data and limited capacity on the part of policymakers and other users to analyze data to inform policies is a very important challenge. And this program addresses that challenge by promoting better access and analysis of gender statistics by all users in order to enable its use for research, for advocacy, and for policy and program making. The flagship program initiative, Making Every Woman and Girl Count, has an integrated approach with national, regional, and global components. The global component does methodological work on what are called Tier 3 indicators to make sure that these indicators are substantiated and have the right methodologies and frameworks in order to help collect data on them. This is one important part of what the global program does. And it also develops and provides guidance for SDG localization. This is work that's currently underway. At the regional level, regional assessments and program development is being conducted in Europe and Central Asia, in Asia and the Pacific, and in West and Central and East and Southern Africa to implement the program at the regional level. And at the national level, we have a range of pathfinder countries that have been selected, and there are national assessments now underway to guide the implementation of the program. Other activities include the establishment of a center of excellence with the National Statistical Office in Mexico that focuses on innovations in gender statistics. And we're also working in the development of a joint UN Women and WHO program on violence against women data. Now, as I said, in terms of under this program, the Flagship Program initiative, we are working in a range of pathfinder countries. The top 5 countries for engagement as a first step to initiating the implementation of this program are Bangladesh, Morocco, Kenya, Uganda, and Senegal, and we have an additional 7 countries that we have identified where work will commence as soon as funding has become available, and another 6 countries in reserve that may be selected as alternatives depending on the availability of funding under this program. So the overall aim of the Flagship Program initiative is to strengthen gender statistics at global, regional and national levels, and with the aim of making that statistics accessible and available to policymakers, to researchers, and to civil society to enable the use of statistics for monitoring policies, advising on policies, and designing policies that can make gender equality and women's rights a reality. So let me now turn to some of the other products that our team produces. In addition to our big reports, we also produce short, succinct, what we call policy briefs on a variety of topics that are aimed at informing time-pressed policymakers, as well as civil society advocates, women's rights organizations, to engage in debates and contestation on areas of policy that are of critical importance to gender equality and women's rights. We have policy briefs on a range of topics, and here you see the front page of 3 of the briefs that focus on social protection, on gender equality, child development and job creation, on protecting women's income security in old age, and we have a series of other topics that you can visit our website and see the briefs that we have produced on the gender gap in income, on the care economy, and many other topics of interest. The research for these briefs, some of it is commissioned to external researchers, some of it is drafted by colleagues in the research and data team, as well as in colleagues sitting in other parts of UN Women, both at headquarters as well as in our country offices and regional offices. And I also would like to emphasize that the policy briefs are all peer-reviewed by both internally as well as by external experts who with expertise on the particular topics to make sure that what is produced meets the highest standards. Now, some of the research that we commission in order to produce our flagship reports also are made available to readers through our discussion paper series. These are particularly useful for researchers, academics, and students because they're relatively long papers with very recent and up-to-date conceptual framing, analytical content, and empirical and data components as well. And again, I want to emphasize, as with our policy briefs, our discussion papers also go through a rigorous and anonymous peer review process to ensure their quality. Needless to say, given all the components that contribute to our flagship reports are peer-reviewed, the flagship reports as well. All the chapters are rigorously peer-reviewed, both internally as well as externally, to ensure that they meet the highest quality standards. Now, you may be asking, it's great to produce all these knowledge products. How does that really percolate and inform policy? We are very keen and we work very hard with our colleagues across UN Women in country offices, in regional offices, in our communications team here at headquarters, as well as colleagues who are specializing in communication and outreach throughout the House to make sure that the research and the data analysis that we do is made accessible through our outreach to media, both conventional media as well as social media, to make sure that it enriches public debate on contemporary issues of concern to a global audience, and to bring in a strong focus on the importance of gender equality into these debates, whether the debates are about how to reform the global economy, whether it's about the gender pay gap, whether it's about violence against women and girls, whether it's about gender equality in peace and reconciliation and humanitarian assistance, whether it's about women's leadership and reform of governance systems to make sure that gender equality is made a reality everywhere, at the national level, at the global level, at the regional level, within local governance throughout. And let me end with a quotation from the UN Secretary General, who said, "To deliver the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN needs to be a 21st century thought leader, a catalyst for action, an innovator, convener and champion of what works, using evidence and data to inform national planning." Through our work on gender statistics and policy-relevant research, we hope to play our part in achieving this vision. Thank you very much for your attention.